I'm really nervous about today's video because I'm going to be using PixInsight for the first time, and I thought it would be a good but maybe stupid idea to record my processing attempt using PixInsight and compare it with a recent image that I processed using Adobe Photoshop. So the image that I'm using is my most recent image of the Rosette Nebula captured with my 3-inch refractor, ZW-533 one-shot color camera and the Optolong L-Extreme filter. That is the image that I got from Photoshop. It's about 6 hours worth of data using 5-minute exposures. And I'm going to see if I can get anywhere near that using PixInsight. So I've watched a lot of videos on YouTube from people like Dylan O'Donnell and others, and I've come up with a very sort of brief workflow that I think will be okay. And I gave it a very quick test before recording this just to make sure that the final output was something that was reasonable. So we'll see how we get on. It might be a complete failure or it might turn out okay. Fingers crossed that it all turns out okay. Hopefully you find that this video is a bit of fun. It's not going to be a tutorial on how to use PixInsight, but I just want to show people that you shouldn't expect to be an expert in something when you first use it. So that's really what I want to prove here, is that if you're doing something for the first time, then it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay because the next time you try it, it will be better. So let's jump straight into it, and I'm just going to drag in my stacked TIFF from Deep Sky Stacker. So I'm starting at the exact same place as what I would do in Photoshop. That is the same stack from Deep Sky Stacker. And the first thing that I'm going to do is the screen transfer function. So anyone that's familiar with PixInsight will know about the screen transfer function and this nuke button down here. So I'm going to press that, and that stretches the data. And that is a really, really powerful tool and probably everyone's favorite thing in PixInsight. To get this result in Photoshop, I stretched the image 7, maybe 8 times in total along the way. And to get to that point that you can see here would probably have been around 4 curve stretches. And of course, the background's completely off, but we're going to sort that out with some color calibration in a minute. I would have been adjusting the levels in Photoshop along the way, but you can just see, I mean, that's a very, very powerful tool and minimal effort. So brilliant, love it. So the next things that I'm going to use are background neutralization, color calibration, and SCNR. And between those 3 things, they will sort out the green background, and then you'll see that actually the screen transfer function stretch is just incredibly powerful when the background is neutralized. So I'm going to use background neutralization first by dragging the triangle onto the image. There we go. You can see that that looks a lot better, and you can see that I kind of need to crop my image in a little bit. I imaged this over 2 nights, and even with plate solving and after meridian flips and things, you can see that it's still not perfect in the same framing, so I can crop that at the end. That's not really a problem. And the next one is color calibration, so I shall drag that one over. Some of these do take a little while to run. Oh, that doesn't look good at all. Let's undo that. Let's try SCNR first, and the color that we're wanting to remove is the green. So let me drag that over and see if that works better. And now let me try color calibration and see if that works better this time. Yeah, kinda. You can see that that's made the background darker, which is good. So I shall leave it like that. I think that looks okay. Somebody that knows what they're doing will probably tell me that that is wrong, but that's okay. I won't need these anymore, so I'll go ahead and close those. The next thing I'm going to do is generate a star mask to reduce the stars. You see the stars are quite big in this image. It kind of takes away from the Rosette Nebula. And I find this quite a convoluted process, but I have only done it once, so that could be why. Mask generation. Star mask. And I want aggregate and binarize. And I'm going to leave these as default and see how I get on. While that's running, you can also open a preview window with this button here and select just a small piece of the image so that when you're running these processes just to test out how they look, they run a lot faster. But obviously I haven't done that for the purposes of this video. I'm just trying to go through it quickly more than properly, to be honest. So there's our mask. Let me move that out of the way. There's our mask. I think that looks pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. It doesn't seem to have picked up any of the Rosette Nebula or anything like that. It looks like there might be a little bit of noise mixed in with them, with the stars. So I think that is okay. And the way to then apply the mask is to go to Process, Morphology, Morphological Transformation. And I'll leave the iterations at 1. I'll drag that over and see how that looks. I think that looks pretty good. I'm just going to undo that and see if I set that to iterations to 2, see how that looks. That's probably too much in my opinion, but I'm going to leave it like that. I think that's okay. And I've gotten rid of the mask, so I don't need to disable the mask, so I can close that now. The next thing I'm going to do is reduce the noise. So if I zoom in and then go down to a sort of area at the bottom, you can see quite a lot of noise in the image at the bottom there. So I'm going to try and get rid of that with TGV denoise, which is in Process, Noise Reduction, TGV denoise. And again, I'm going to leave everything as default because I'm assuming that that's probably the best thing to do. And I will let that run. While that's running, it's worth noting that PixInsight can be downloaded as a free trial. I think you get 45 days as a free trial, I want to say, which is pretty good. I've just bought it with the conversion from euros to pounds. It's 230 euros, which worked out at about 195 pounds. So it's quite an initial outlay. It is quite a big outlay at first, but once you've paid that, unlike Photoshop, which is a subscription that you pay every month, I've paid it. I now own it. I can install it on other computers when, if I upgrade my laptop, etc. And you also get any new updates that are put onto PixInsight. You can download those for free. So it's an initial outlay that's quite big, but actually I think it's worth it in total for what you get. The cost of a Photoshop subscription, you would kind of get that back in PixInsight after sort of 12 to 18 months. The cost ends up being about the same, and then Photoshop obviously continues to cost money after that. That looks pretty terrible. Once I have zoomed in, you can see that it's kind of ruined the stars. And I don't know if that's because the iterations are all the way up to 100. What I will do, when I did this before, I actually did a step before this, and I don't know if perhaps that's what's causing the issue. It might be, it might not be. I don't really see why it would be, but I'll try it anyway. The histogram transformation. So the screen transfer function is a non-destructive stretch of your image. So it's not actually applied to the image. This is just a preview of what the curve stretch has done. So in order to actually apply the stretch to the image, you need to take the screen transfer function and put that onto the histogram transformation, which you can then see applies that curve stretch. and then drag that over to your image for that to be applied. That then blows out the image entirely because it's essentially stretched twice, so you have to turn the preview of the screen transfer function off. And I can now close that, and I will also close that because I don't think I need it. And now that I've done that, let me try this again. I don't really see why that would have made any difference, to be honest, but maybe it will. Okay, so that has finished running. That did take a while, so I paused the video just while it was running, and you can see that that actually has made a huge difference. And yeah, applying the histogram change first, I don't know why. If somebody knows the reason why, then put a comment down below as to why running denoise after applying the curve worked. Is it because it's just previewed? Perhaps that's what it is. Maybe it's because it's just previewed and not actually applied it to the image at that point. So maybe I've answered my own question there. Okay, I'm happy with that. So just so you can see, I'll just undo that for a second. So you can see, I hope this comes across in the video. If I zoom in more, I hope you can see this in the video, that if I now apply that again, you can see that it just got rid of quite a lot of noise in the image. Just to do it again, there we go. So I'm really happy with that. I think that makes the image look a lot better than it did. So I'm going to close that, and actually let's do a little progress check. So let me move that back over there. So in terms of detail, I think the detail is pretty similar. It's almost there. Obviously this is red, probably slightly too red, to be honest. I might have overdone it for the purposes of social media, but I much prefer the backgrounds of the PixInsight version. I think that looks a lot better. I think the stars also look a lot better. I'm probably a bit heavy-handed on PixInsight in terms of star reduction, but actually I think it still looks quite good. Okay, so let's carry on because there's still a few things to do. I'm going to do some manual curves adjustments now, which can be found under intensity transformations, curves transformation. And so anyone familiar with Photoshop, like I am, this is an RGB curve. So if I stretch the image like I would in Photoshop, then that would apply that to all three channels. You can isolate each channel RGB and stretch them separately if you want to, and you can also do a hue and saturation curve stretch if you want to. I'm gonna, just for the purposes of this, just do an RGB stretch. And actually, sorry, if I just reset that, that bottom right button is to reset. If you press this circle button when you're doing the transformation, it brings up a little preview window, which is very helpful. So if I now curve stretch this, I'm going to go quite aggressive just because why not. So if I bring the background back down to something a bit more reasonable, I've lightened the nebula and brought the background back down so that I don't lighten the whole image. I think that looks reasonably good. I'm going to drag that over to this image to apply it. And what I really like about PixInsight is that it's kept the curves transformation settings that I had a second ago, and it's now applied a second stretch to the preview. So you can see that the preview on the left has had an extra curve applied to the preview on the right. So it's the exact same in terms of the stretch, but it's applied it a second time. And I think that looks all right, actually. I'm just going to maybe bring that down slightly. And let me see what that looks like that. I think that looks okay. So I'm going to apply that. And you can see that that's now stretched it a third time. And actually, I think that looks better. So I'm going to drag that across. If I was doing this in Photoshop, this would take so much longer. I personally think that this is now too much. So I'm going to leave it there. But I think that looks really, really good. And the next thing I'm going to do is saturation, which annoyingly is in the same window that I was just in. Curves transformation. So I can now go over to the saturation tab. And again, if I open a preview, I can adjust this line here to saturate the image to bring out more of the red. So obviously do it all the way up here, it's a bit overdone, but let me just reset that to see where it was. So that's where it was. If I bring it up maybe about something along those lines, I think. Let's see how that looks on here. No, I don't like that at all. Let me undo that. Let me reset this and go again from up the top. Just a slight adjustment there. There, I think that looks better. And then if I compare the Photoshop version, it is quite a bit more red. I found the colours a bit easier to bring out. Let me see what I can do to this. That's not looking great. If I just make a slight adjustment like that. There. I think that looks okay. I shall close those. So that's where we are currently. But there's one thing left to do, which is to just sharpen the image slightly, which is under convolution, unsharp mask. And again, I'm going to leave everything as default, and I'm going to zoom in on the image here just to get a bit of a better view as this applies. So if I undo that, just to see how it works. So you can see if you concentrate around the sort of middle where these stars are in the middle, as I turn this back on, you just see that it does sharpen it up quite nicely. And if I zoom back out and just undo it and apply it again, I do think that looks a lot better actually. I'm really happy with that. So I can close that. And do you know what? I think that looks pretty respectable. I'm going to leave it there in terms of processing it in PixInsight. I think things that need to improve, I think the colours in PixInsight need to be better, but that's not a fault of PixInsight, that's just my own fault for not knowing how to use it properly. I prefer the colour of the Photoshop final image, but actually I could take the PixInsight output and put it into Photoshop and adjust the colours if I wanted to. But actually the result from PixInsight I think is far less noisy, it's sharper, and I don't think there's any extra detail as such, but I think the whole contrast is just much better, quite frankly. And if I look at the background of this image compared with Photoshop, you can see that actually as I've reduced the stars in Photoshop, they've all got rings around them. That's from doing the dust and scratches, but overdoing it slightly. And I smoothed the background so much that actually that kind of, it makes the background look nice and soft, but it's kind of ruined the stars, and actually it's made the nebula look really soft. So that's not really a problem for sharing it on social media, but you certainly wouldn't want to print an image that looks like that. But I'm really happy with that. And if I zoom in on these stars, I think they are much better in PixInsight than they are in Photoshop. So much better. I'm really happy with that. I've probably used about 1%, if that, of PixInsight's capability there. But I think you'll agree that that's a pretty respectable image for someone that doesn't know what he's doing, having just watched a few YouTube videos and made a few scribbles of things to do to process this image. I'm much happier with this version than the Photoshop version. And I've been using Photoshop for, what would it be, probably 4 or 5 years now. So I know my way around Photoshop a lot more, but PixInsight is a lot better based on this. There's a reason why the astrophotographers that I sort of look up to the most in this hobby, that churn out the best images, in my opinion, all use PixInsight. A couple use Photoshop, but generally they all use PixInsight, and I can see why. That is a much better quality image, in my opinion. It's far from perfect, but of course there's a million and one other things that I could do to this image. So I hope you found this video useful. It's just a very quick overview of using PixInsight for the first time to see if you can get a decent final image. The answer is yes, you absolutely can. And comparing it to my Photoshop version, I'm actually happier with that, having used PixInsight once compared to having used Photoshop for 4 or 5 years. So I think that speaks volumes about the quality of PixInsight. So I'm now going to go and learn a hell of a lot more about PixInsight. Don't expect a proper PixInsight tutorial from me anytime soon, because I need to do a lot more research on that before I am ready to do that. I hope you found this video useful. Please give it a thumbs up if you liked the video, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. And I will see you in the next video.